I do think that if he pursues this in the way that it does seem like he's going to, in that they want to pursue a deal and they think that Ukraine might have to cede that territory, I think that poses very big questions for European leaders. That is the US flexing its muscles in a way that will embolden Russia. And what are European leaders going to do about that?
There is talk of, well, Ukraine is going to have to settle for losing some of its territory to Russia. Is that all there is to it, in your view, Arthur? That Ukraine is going to concede some territory that's been traditionally occupied by Russian-speaking Ukrainians, that the Russian military has been present in for a long time. Is that really all there is to having a solution to this war?
Well, Ukraine would say very much not. But I suppose if Mr. Trump says, this is what you need to do, we'll draw a line basically where the current front line is, which is 20% of Ukraine plus Crimea. And yes, historically, plenty of people there spoke Russian, but it was always Ukraine. There's never a doubt about that. But if that's what they say, and then Mr. Trump says, and we're not going to continue to supply you, Ukraine, with weapons, but also let's not forget its funding as well. You know, the Ukrainian economy is functioning on a lot of Western aid because it needs that to keep going. If that happens, I don't think the Europeans have the wherewithal to continue to supply Ukraine. They ought to. You know, our economies collectively are way bigger than Russia's, but we don't have the defense industry base. We're not able to churn out the munitions at the rate that they need them. So it's quite possible that Trump will effectively force that on the Ukrainians. That would be a huge gift to Russia. We could speculate as to why Donald Trump wants to do that. Why is he so keen for Russia to effectively win this war? But if that happens, it may be there isn't much that the rest of the world can do to stop him.
Liz, clearly there is a huge amount of concern in Ukraine and within NATO and British defence circles that the US simply doesn't want to continue under Donald Trump. It won't want to continue providing the same level of support for Ukraine. And of course, what the United States has been providing just dwarfs what everyone else in the West, those supporting Ukraine, are able to send.
Absolutely. And this was, I think, the big concern in the run-up to the US election when it came to Europe and global politics, but Europe in particular and Ukraine, because we've known for a long time that this was the position. I think the question really is, look, we know that Donald Trump primarily is a businessman, a deal maker. This, I think we should see as a negotiating position. We know that he's not happy with the fact that the US has played this role as a sort of financier of this war, and such a kind of central part of it that he feels that other NATO countries are not playing their part, and he wants to see them hit their financial targets. So I think we can see it in that context. But I do think that if he pursues this in the way that it does seem like he's going to, in that they want to pursue a deal and they think that Ukraine might have to cede that territory, I think that poses very big questions for European leaders. That is the US flexing its muscles in a way that will embolden Russia. And what are European leaders going to do about that?
Yeah, and
we don't know, but it's a power move by him. They have to decide whether they want to push back against that or not.
And that is clearly a huge concern, one of the many huge concern within Sir Keir Starmer's government. And as he tries to shore up relations with the incoming Trump team, the decision about who he appoints as the next British ambassador to Washington is going to be an absolutely crucial one. We are hearing that Peter Mandelson is a likely appointment. Potentially David Miliband, a former Labour cabinet minister, now running international rescue out there from the United States. Perhaps Cathy Ashton. It is going to be quite a delicate and a really, really important appointment, isn't it, Sam?
Yeah, I think personally, despite my previous comments about Trump's approach to women, I think I think it's a great shame actually that Dame Karen Pierce, who is the current ambassador, is not being kept on. I mean, I think her term's already been slightly extended. I think it would have been good if her term had been extended, perhaps for at least another year, because she's hugely popular with the Trump team. I don't know about with Trump himself, but certainly with the team, she's incredibly well connected. That she's done an awful lot of work, and I think that would have been a good diplomatic move. But I understand why Labour, they want to come in and bring in their own people. You can see why they would want to do that. I think Peter Mandelson is an obvious candidate. He has the sort of gravitas that you can see could deal with somebody like President Trump and his team. David Miliband, I think, would be an interesting move, because I'm not sure Trump would go for him in the same way. I'm not sure he would respect him in the same way, given his kind of career history. But I think you could see Peter Mandelson certainly taking on that role. Of course, though, he is in the running to become the Chancellor of Oxford. So I don't know how those two jobs would coincide, or if he'll even get either. I don't know. Maybe you'll get both. Maybe you'll get neither. It's too early to say.
That would be quite a nice dilemma to have, wouldn't it? Which of those two jobs
absolutely.
you'd take? And Liz, this comes at a time when Keir Starmer seems to be increasingly looking to the Blair era. Not only Peter Mandelson there in the running for this job, David Miliband, he's just brought in Jonathan Powell, former Chief of Staff to Tony Blair, as his national security advisor. And we've got a host of other advisors from the Blair era already there in and around number 10.
Yes, and to be honest, I'm not surprised. This has been going on informally for quite a long time. So the Starmer team have long had conversations with Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, these big figures from that era who've been kind of feeding in their advice. It looks like some of that might, be put on a formal footing. The reason that this doesn't surprise me is because I think it's quite clear now that even though they had people that they thought were in place, in particular Sue Gray, who were preparing for government. Remember, this is a party that's been out of office for 14 years. So they needed that preparation to be in place. They actually didn't, in the end, have people doing it to the standard that they needed it to happen, which I think is why we've seen a bit of drift in this first period of the Starmer government. And I've had MPs say to me on both sides of the House, there's a bit of a lack of legislation, actually. There's like a lot of general debates going on. There's a lot of consultations. There's a lot of issues that were promised that there would be immediate action on in the manifesto. And they seem to be getting kicked already into the long grass. So when you look at somebody like Alan Milburn and Jonathan Powell, you see the wealth of expertise that they will bring in to these. I mean, Jonathan Powell will be an expert on foreign policy and will be much needed. And Alan Milburn has that level of expertise in the NHS. These are the two potentially defining policy areas when it comes to this government, which I think at the moment still needs a bit of direction, and it desperately needs that level of expertise bringing in. So, and given that they already had those kind of informal relationships with some of the leading lights from that era, I'm not surprised that they're going to bring them in a more formal way.
Yeah, and we'll hear a bit more about Alan Milburn, what he's been saying about health and looking ahead to that big health speech in just a moment. But just before we go to the news, Liz, as you mentioned Sue Gray, she was supposed to be given some job with the regions, but seems to have disappeared without trace.
Look, I think we see what's going on from the outside in politics, and we can sometimes forget the personal issues. There's a person basically at the centre of all of this. Sue Gray had a very long career in the civil service. She had a very good reputation. She put all that on the line. She was thrown into the public eye in a way that was probably quite uncomfortable. And she was put into this very powerful position, thinking that she would be in Keir Starmer's government for a long time. And, politics can be very unforgiving. And she is now, pretty much on the back burner, sidelined, and probably quite humiliated. So I imagine that is why we've not really seen much of her. I think she will. Look, she did a lot of work with the regional mayors and they really respected her. So I'm not surprised that is the role that they see her in moving forward. But look, she fell out with basically everybody in the top team, and it was a very difficult situation. And I imagine that she probably needed a rest, and I think she probably deserved one.
Liz Bates and Sam Lister, many thanks for that. Do stay with us. We're going to talk about more of the big issues on the government's agenda, including that big speech coming up later this week from Wes Streeting on the NHS. First, though, let's catch up with the very latest news from Mike Powell.